All right, everybody, welcome in to another episode of the NFL Seekers podcast. Today, we're coming at you with our top 20 wide receiver rankings for fantasy football. We'll be yapping about receivers 20 to 11 on our list. Our next episode will be our top 10 receiver rankings, so stay tuned for that one. But I'm super excited to talk about these receivers. They're being drastically pushed up boards. They're dominating the first round. It's a receiver heavy year this year. So it's going to be fun deciphering what ones to fade, what ones we're higher on, and really excited to talk about these receivers. How are you, Josh?
Doing really good. I mean, we could talk about like 45, 60 wide receivers. So it's hard. Obviously, we're narrowing it down to our top 20 here, but arguably one of the most important positions in fantasy football. Definitely the depth of it, the later round picks of it definitely matter a ton. If you got to hit on these guys, you got to get them right if you want to be competitive in your league. But Dan, it's hot outside, man. Summer is in the air. I think it was 105 degrees today. We're going to be hiding inside with our AC, cranking out these podcasts. But man, I'm feeling the heat today.
Yeah, this room I'm in right now is super hot because the sun's like about to come down. So it's just glaring on my window right now. And can't have my fan on all the way or else it'll mess up the audio. So I'm kind of dying over here. So let's just get right into these receivers before I overheat. Let's talk about the honorable mentions. There's like you said, a lot of receivers to talk about. So we'll talk about a few of these guys. We put 5 honorable mentions for the receivers because there's just so many good ones. Like Mike Evans missed out on our list, which feels a little bit criminal. He, is being drafted as a wide receiver 17. He finished with 16.6 points per game last year. We're probably too low on Mike Evans. It's hard. It's hard to project his situation and just, you know, Dave Canales left, and that's really tough. We're both really big on Dave Canales, and that is something that's a little bit scary to project with the age. He's not the most exciting option, so that's why we're fading him just a little bit. But anything you want to say on Mike Evans?
Yeah, he's just Mr. Reliable, and it is kind of sad. It's kind of like you know what you're getting out of Mike Evans, but it's just like every year, you get a little scared off by his age, and he does get pushed down by draft season with his ADP. But a really super solid option, I'd say, this year probably a pretty high end upside wide receiver too for most people. Just the level of consistency with this guy is off the charts. I swear it's been 11 straight 1,000 yard seasons, and he's a touchdown machine, and him and Baker have a really good chemistry. But, we're more projecting guys just with bigger upside and bigger ceilings and younger, faster, a little bit more exciting receivers. And that's who I tend to lean towards. And so, maybe it does feel like Mike Evans is being a little underrated, but at the same time, he is a receiver in his 30s.
No, that's it. We really do just love a lot of receivers. There's a lot of good receivers we're gonna talk about. He still comes in as our wide receiver 21. We're not low on him by any means. It's just we're really high on a lot of receivers. DK Metcalf, he's my wide receiver 17. Really love him. I had him last year and I really enjoyed it. He's some boom weeks and he can really win you a week like he did against the Cowboys last year. He averaged 14.1 points per game. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 23 right now in the ADP. So I do think DK Metcalf, along with someone we'll talk about later, Michael Pittman, are 2 of the best values that you'll get at the receiver position with their ADPs. He's the #1 receiver. I'm high on that Seahawks offense. So I really, really love the DK Metcalf current ADP. And Stefon Diggs is an interesting one. We're both exactly spot on Stefon Diggs. We both have him ranked at 23. So we just barely misses our list, comes in at 23. Anything you want to say in Stefon Diggs? It's really hard to predict that situation. And we'll talk about Nico a little bit later.
It's just a crowded offense. And so it's just like how much, can you I feel like, Stephon Diggs is just always just been, the #1 wide receiver in an offense, and he just demands those targets. But he's coming to an offense where I'd argue, obviously, I have Nico Collins higher. And I think Tank Dell is very close. And you have Dalton Schultz, and you have Noah Brown. And now you have Joe Mixon, who is going to steal, targets too. So it's just a very crowded offense. And so I feel like the upside is very limited with Stephon Diggs, but he definitely could, I feel like he's going to be a boomer bust this year. I feel like he'll be solid, but I feel like where he's going to be drafted is going to be either very boom or bust for people.
Yeah, I think he's being drafted a little bit too high. I think where we have him is the perfect sweet spot because he will have a high floor. He is going to be a reliable option for CJ. I think he'll be a really good intermediate option like he was last year, probably playing the slot more than he ever has. So it will be interesting. I just don't think the upside is, as drastic as a Nico Collins. And then our other two honorable mentions, Zay Flowers and T. Higgins. Zay Flowers is going as a wide receiver 25. T. Higgins is being faded into the oblivion right now, going as wide receiver 28, and it's actually going up. He was like wide receiver 31 just a few days ago. So it's crazy. He only averaged 11.5 last year. Zay averaged 12.9. Zay's a little bit easier to make that projection. He probably is the wide receiver one outside of Mark Andrews. So, I know you're really optimistic on Zay. I'm a little bit higher on T. Higgins just because of the receivers that are going around him. I'll just take T's talent. But anything you want to say in those last two?
Yeah, well, T. Higgins, it's I don't know whether it was the contract, or what it is, but he's like, yeah, he's kind of fallen off a cliff, but he is probably the best wide receiver two on a team in football right now, in my opinion. He has that wide receiver one upside, and people have to remember Joe Burrow wasn't healthy last year, so Joe Burrow was out most of the year. He's playing with Jake Browning, so we should definitely see T. Higgins, and he's on a franchise tag, he's on a contract year, so that that does speak volumes. I will always point that out because when players are on their contract years, they tend to play better because they want to get that bag. So T. Higgins, could be an absolute steal this year. And Zay Flowers, like you said, it's easy to predict it with him because he is the best wide receiver on his team. Obviously outside of Mike or Mark Andrews, but he'll be a fun option. He'll definitely give you those boom weeks. Sorry, I don't have Zay Flowers stats pulled up, but he didn't score a ton, did he, last year?
No, it doesn't bring a lot of touchdowns. He did towards the end of the season. You might be able to boost that up and have some unlocked potential. I think you had him as your wide receiver 21, so I do like that. He does have that type of upside.
Yeah, I mean, he did find the end zone 5 times last year, and I don't know, he's definitely an exciting, polarizing player, but I couldn't find a spot for him in the top 20.
Yeah, and there's a lot of receivers we'll talk about. We'll make some episodes just to talk about the sleeper receivers in this fantasy season. But let's go on to our wide receiver 20. Really excited to talk about this player, Malik Nabers, rookie, sixth overall pick to the New York Giants out of LSU. I love it. I comped him to OBJ coming out. I said he is rookie year. Odell Beckham Jr. happens to go to the Giants. Couldn't have aged any better. I think it's perfect. You watch him in training camp, and I hate to use like the practice highlights or whatever, but you just watch him snag it one-handed, pluck these balls just so naturally. He is gonna be him. He's gonna be so good, man. I'm so excited for Malik Nabers. He comes in as my wide receiver 21, Stores as wide receiver 17, the consensus wide receiver 21, the Seekers wide receiver 20. And I'll let you talk about him first, even though I really want to talk about him because he's just so fun.
Yes, he's part of that. All I can say with Malik Nabers is just yes. He's part of that great LSU wide receiver history. And the dude's just explosive and he's electric. And he comes into a very, very, very weak wide receiver core in New York. I mean, there is no competition. I mean, they have okay wide receivers. Wandell Robinson is fine. Darius Slayton is okay. They're just not these high floor guys that are going to demand a ton of targets and are going to be, consistent on a week and week basic, week in, week out basic. But Malik Nabers is going to come into this offense. He has a little bit of that diva mentality attitude, which is probably good because he's going to demand targets from Daniel Jones, which I really like. And they're going to find a way to utilize him because honestly, as a rookie right now, he is far and away their best talent. He is their best talented wide receiver, running back, tight end, doesn't matter. He's more talented than anyone on that offense right now. So the offense has got to revolve around Malik Nabers. And I feel like he's going to have like a rookie Odell Beckham Jr. type season. I mean, he was an absolute stud at LSU. He made Jaden Daniels very, very good and helped Jaden Daniels win a Heisman. And I mean, he can run almost every route. He can line up in the slot. He can line up out wide. But this offense is going to revolve around Malik Nabers. So I am going to be higher on him. And I see the vision with him very, very clearly. Obviously, he is a rookie. There is some rookie hiccups, but I don't see that with Malik Nabers. His game was just so clean, so flawless coming out of college. The route running's there, the separation is there, and I see it translating very easy and just demanding a ton of targets in that offense.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. He might damn near just be their entire offense. They could just put him in that Saquon role and just attack him and have him be the focal point of the offense. Everyone knows that, Danny Dimes isn't great. Maybe that's why he's being drafted as a wide receiver 21, but I don't think it'll matter. I think that Neighbors will still be great. I think Dimes is, accurate enough to get it to Neighbors and the intermediate game, and Neighbors are just such a good yak threat. He is really dangerous and just so smooth after the catch. I really was one of the better receiver prospects to come out in a long time. Outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., Jamar Chase, maybe Odunze, you'd be hard pressed to find really better receiver prospects coming out the last decade. So he is a freak. He's going to be awesome. He's going to demand the targets, the respect. He has the draft capital. He has it all going for him. And I think we are just going to be hiring him because we know how good of a player he is. He's a special athlete. He's got that Jamar Chase upside and, could be a top 5 receiver in drafts next year if they get a good quarterback in there and things go right. So I think he's going to be a fantastic value. Like I said earlier, not to use camp highlights or anything with too much relevance, but he just snatches the ball. It's just so smooth. He is just a really good receiver, and you can just see it when you watch him on the field. So really
He's got
excited about
that.
Malik.
Yeah, he's got that Odell Beckham Jr. vibe. You can feel it. But Dan, I do have you've heard the recent rumors that have come out in the last couple of weeks where the Vikings actually tried to trade up with the Chargers, quote unquote. I can't remember the source, but they tried to trade up with the Chargers, and I don't know if this was totally bogus, but they said that they're trying to trade Justin Jefferson for the 5th overall pick. Do you believe that to draft Malik Nabers?
I mean, I'm sure they entertained it and had calls because they are similar type of players and prospects, and that Neighbors has that wide receiver one in the NFL type of upside. He really does. He can be a Justin Jefferson. I don't see why he couldn't be physically at all. So I understand it if you don't want to pay him that absolute bag. I could see why they would at least entertain and call on it.
That would have been the trade that shook the
Oh,
draft. The trade that never happened. That would have been absolutely nuts.
oh,
Gosh, that would have been crazy, man. I just what could have been. I saw a video of somebody that they posted what could have been of that with Justin Herbert and Justin Jefferson, which just would have been legendary.
you would have loved that one. But with that, let's go under our wide receiver 19, Michael Pittman Jr. for the Indianapolis Colts. My wide receiver 16, Stores is wide receiver 20, the consensus ADP wide receiver 24, the NFL Seekers wide receiver 19. Like I said earlier, one of the better values. I don't know what consensus is fading Michael Pittman for so much. I mean, he averaged 15.6 last year in 2023. I think PPR in general, we're doing PPR rankings, and I think PPR is just what Michael Pittman really specializes in. You should move him up your PPR rankings because he is the target in that Colts offense. I'm not really expecting AD Mitchell to demand too much volume as a rookie. Maybe year 2 he emerges, but I do think it's going to be Pittman's offense, and that whole passing offense will run through Pittman, and I'm positive he'll be the most targeted guy. So I think the real question is just like how high of volume, like passing volume, will this offense produce? How high is the passing offense upside in this offense? But I do love Anthony Richardson. I think he's an awesome passer. I just think he needs to stay healthy and trust himself and push it downfield. And I think it could be really fun. But yeah, Michael Pittman thrives in the intermediate game, and I just think in the PPR leagues he's just too valuable. Wide receiver 24 ADP. I think he'll 100% outperform that no matter what. He could miss a few games and he'll probably finish over wide receiver 24. So I think he's one of the better values and just really love, and I think he's one of the more reliable players as well.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Pittman has had 3 straight seasons. I mean, he's only been in the NFL for 4 years, but 3 straight seasons with over 120 targets. The last 2 seasons were 141 targets and 156 targets. So you're right. PPR, he is very valuable. The last 2 years, he's had 100 actual receptions in both years, and then 2 of the last 3 years, he's had over 1,000 receiving yards. His touchdowns, I do believe his ceiling could be a lot higher this year with Anthony Richardson. I feel like they are going to be able to push the ball down the field, be a little bit more aggressive. I love Shane Steichen. I think he's the quarterback guru. If anyone's going to unlock Anthony Richardson, it's going to be him. And Michael Pittman's going to benefit from that. And that is current ADP. He is a value and he is a steal in PPR. So don't be shied off by Michael Pittman because he's going to be a value. So, I mean, if you're getting him around anywhere, I'd say ADP 20, you're getting an absolute steal, high wide receiver too. So, he's going to pay his value. Let's just say that he might be, on this list, the guy that pays his value the most.
Yeah, and only 4 touchdowns last season. I think that is why he's going as a wide receiver 24. Could definitely improve that. ESPN projects him only having 4 touchdowns as well, has him under 100 receptions, less receiving yards as last year. I don't see that being the case. I really do think the offense is just a lot better this year. With hopefully a full season of healthy Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen, and they're coaching him up. AD Mitchell coming in, I really do think that offense will be better. I think Michael Pittman will luck into touchdowns. Like they'll be in the red zone, and he's a reliable guy. They'll maybe get him some gadget plays. I do think he has more than 4 touchdowns. So I'm definitely calling my shot on Michael Pittman. Definitely a my guy, and I think his ADP is just simply too low. So we're taking advantage of that. Anything else you want to say on him?
No, no, let's get on to our next guy. I'm excited to talk about this next guy.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about our next guy. Very polarizing. DJ Moore for the Chicago Bears. He's my wide receiver 22. Stores is wide receiver 14. The consensus wide receiver 18. Our wide receiver 18. So very polarizing numbers here. Really fun discussion. You bring in Keenan Allen, one of the better receivers in the NFL last year, performance wise, and Rome Odunze with a top 10 pick. So a lot of things changing up in that offense, not to mention Caleb Williams comes in for Justin Fields. So you've got a bigger pie to work with, but his target, his pie piece might be a little bit smaller. So how do you project DJ Moore to play out this year with this new offense?
So, I don't project his role to go down at all. I'm going to be quite honest with you. That's why I have him higher than ADP at 14. Because if anything scares me off, it'd be Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze. I feel like their games complement each other, are a lot more similar than DJ Moore's. I feel like DJ Moore's a little bit more of a field stretcher. He's a little bit more of a burner, a little bit more of a finesse wide receiver. To where Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze are really just your really good route runners, really solid, reliable hands guys. But I'm excited for DJ Moore, and I'm excited for Caleb Williams' deep ball with him. I mean, DJ Moore did, he had 96 receptions, on 136 targets for 1,364 yards and 8 touchdowns with a mixture of Tyson Bagent and Justin Fields last year. So I just feel like the ceiling gets a lot higher. I feel like the offense is a little bit more unlocked. And I feel like, having the other receivers on your team is just going to open up the field because teams aren't going to be able to double DJ Moore like they were so often last year. So I just see a lot more opportunities. I'm really excited for Caleb Williams' deep ball with DJ Moore. I feel like he's going to have a lot of those really big boom weeks like he did last season. So somebody I'm really high on. I'm going to continue to be higher on him than ADP, but it's kind of disrespectful, for Keenan Allen to be left off this, top 25 list. I think we just see his game. I don't know. I feel like he's getting up there in age. Rome Odunze is just the successor behind him. So that's maybe a discussion that we need to throw out there because I think Keenan Allen finishes what last year for PPR.
I don't know what spot he finished in, but he finishes the fourth highest NP points per game last year, which is insane. Like we're probably sleeping on Keenan as well, but it is so hard just to project this situation because I'm really high on Odunze as well. I think Caleb will want to develop that rookie chemistry together. So it's going to be interesting to see how the target share plays out. I think DJ Moore is who everyone thinks is going to be that number one, but like, would you be completely surprised? Is it completely out of the realm of possibility that Keenan finishes as that number one target getter just because he's going to always be open? And, would you rather throw it to a wide open Keenan Allen over the middle of the field or a DJ Moore or Rome Odunze who are in a contested catch situation downfield? It is interesting. I could see a world where Keenan really does just make us look stupid not talking about him in this episode. So I do definitely want to mention Keenan, have that conversation. This whole offense, just trying to predict where the points play out in this offense. It's really tough, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a better offense. They're all going to be better. They're all going to be in the red zone a lot more, scoring a lot more touchdowns. Caleb Williams, a dog, and we both full-heartedly believe that Caleb Williams will make this team legit on offense. So it's really fun. It's a fun discussion, and I'm pretty optimistic for DJ Moore. I'm just a little bit on the lower side because I'm really, really optimistic for Keenan and Odunze.
Yeah, I mean, It's not out of the realm of possibility by any means. I mean, Keenan Allen is just a safety net blanket for any quarterback. Obviously, you saw it with Justin Herbert. It was just his go-to guy. He was always finding a way to get open. But he also really was, a lot of times Mike Williams was hurt, and you're playing with Quentin Johnston and Semi Fehoko. You have wide receivers you don't really trust. So I feel like the Chargers just had to feed Keenan Allen a lot. So I don't know. I could see it going either way. It is a tough discussion. It is a bold take because he is just he's Mr. Reception, Mr. PPR. So I mean, he really could make us eat our words, and he could finish as the wide receiver one in this offense. But I like the upside, honestly, of probably the other two a little bit more because I mean, Keenan Allen is on the wrong side of 30 at this point.
Yeah, very interesting discussion. I mean, DJ Moore finished as the wide receiver 6 last year, like you said, with Justin Fields. He had 16.9 points per game. So you do just have to project how that pie splits with Odunze and Keenan Allen. It's going to be really fun to see how it plays out, though. And we'll be talking a lot more about DJ Moore. So let's just go on to our wide receiver 17, which is Devonta Smith for the Eagles. My wide receiver 18, Stores' wide receiver 16, the consensus wide receiver 19, the NFL Seekers wide receiver 17. And yeah, just consistency is what you need to know when thinking of Devonta Smith. And I'll let you talk about him first since you're 2 spots higher on him. And I love him.
One of my skinny Batman, man. He's skinny Batman in the wide receiver core. Devontae Smith, man, I just have to. I love his history. I love who he is. He's one of the better route runners. He's got some of the cleaner hands. Obviously, he's in an offense with not DJ Moore, AJ Brown, who is just an absolute diva, target demander, insane wide receiver. But I'm very optimistic this year with Devonta Smith in a new offense with Kellen Moore. I'm excited to see what Kellen Moore can do with him. I feel like his game reminds me a lot kind of Keenan Allen, but I feel like maybe he's a little bit more versatile and a little bit better a lot better down the field than Keenan Allen is. But just, one of the guys who just is an incredible separator, getting open. And I feel like the way that Kellen Moore runs his offense is going to complement Devonta Smith very well. And I feel like he'll be open on a lot of these short, intermediate, routes. And so I feel like, he's had back-to-back seasons of actually back-to-back seasons of 100 plus targets in every single year. I feel like he's going to maintain that. I feel like he's an 80 95 reception guy. Or sorry, when I said back-to-back seasons, those targets of 100 plus, not receptions. But I feel like he is an 80 to 90 reception guy. I feel like his upside in this offense, I feel like they're not going to be, I don't know. I feel like they're prone to regress from being on the 1 yard line as much. And so I'm hoping he gets in the end zone a little bit more. He did score 7 times in the last 2 years or in back-to-back years. But I don't know. Very, very excited, very optimistic about this new offense under Kellen Moore with Devonta Smith. And I really like the skill set he brings to a Kellen Moore type offense.
Yeah, pretty much copy and paste for me. I loved the player. That's the main thing with Devonta Smith is I loved him coming out of Alabama. He's just a really fun, refined route runner. Really, he does come down with great contested balls. Like he'll be 50-yard downfield with a corner bigger than him, and he'll come down with it. He's really special downfield. He makes great big plays. He'll have those boom weeks where he can get you like 40 points, like he did in week 2 last year. So really love Devontae. I will say I have him 1 spot higher than Jaylen Waddle, which is against consensus. I think I'm the only person that I've seen rank Devonta Smith over Jaylen Waddle. It's interesting. They both averaged exactly 14.2 points per game last year. I know Waddle was hurt, but that is interesting. And I do just see Smith is just a little bit more consistent. I do value just his consistency. I do think he's like a 10 to 12 point floor every single week. I expect him to get like 125 targets this year, and he had 112 last year. So I do think the floor is just great for Devonta Smith. And like you said, he should be able to bring in some more, red zone, goal line touchdowns. So I really love the player. I like the situation. Bringing Saquon in there, the offense should be even better than it was last year. I think it definitely will be better than it was last year. I think they'll kind of fix a lot of things internally that weren't really going well. I think AJ Brown will be a little bit less vocal, and I just think the offense will be smoother. So I am optimistic for Devonta Smith. I know I'm lower than Stores, but I'm still higher than ADP, and I am drafting Devonta Smith. Love the player.
Yeah, I mean, he's had 3,200 yards and 20 touchdowns in 3 seasons while playing with AJ Brown. That's it's impressive, man. That's wide receiver 1 type stuff, with playing with an elite top 5, wide receiver. So it's impressive stuff. Devonta Smith is very, very incredible wide receiver and shows promising upside and can have, like you said, those boom weeks. So very, very excited for him this year.
Yeah, easily one of the better wide receiver twos in the NFL. Like you said, he's right up there with T. Higgins. Absolutely electric, dynamic playmaker. Love Devonta Smith. And with that, we'll go on to our wide receiver 16 because it's a very similar discussion. Two guys that I have ranked right next to each other in my personal rankings. They both finished with 14.2 points per game last year, which was a little bit crazy. Jaylen Waddle for the Miami Dolphins, my wide receiver 19. Stores is wide receiver 13. Consensus ADP wide receiver 16, our wide receiver 16, and I'll let you talk about him again first because you're 6 spots higher than him.
Another guy that was in this Devonta Smith, same draft, Alabama boys. Just incredible stuff, man. I mean, their track record is just amazing. I mean, these guys are getting over 100 targets per year. He's played 3 seasons. Obviously, his first year was his best years before Tyreek Hill came in, but he had 140 targets, 1,000, receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. But he's a pretty good level of consistency, and he is a player that I do value in fantasy because that Dolphins offense is so electric and has those big, huge, giant boom weeks to where, Jaylen Waddle will have those 200 yards and 2 touchdown type games because that offense is so electric. They throw the ball down the field, they move the ball. Him and Tyreek Hill are arguably the 2 most elite electric guys with the ball in their hands. When they get, I mean, these guys can take a slant at the house on any given route. But yeah, I mean, 3 consistent years of over 1,000 receiving yards, 3 years of over 100 targets, and 3 year, or sorry, not 3 years, but I mean, where he struggles a little bit is his touchdowns. I mean, we're 6, 8, and 4 last year, regressed a little bit. I do project him to probably have around 6 touchdowns, 1,000 yards, and 80 receptions this year. And I think Tyreek Hill, I don't know, he might be human. He might start to slow down. He is getting up there in age. He is in his 30s. I think this offense will start to probably shift Jaylen Waddle into their wide receiver 1 role. But another guy is just incredible athlete. Obviously, a high end wide receiver 2 on his team that can put up 1,000 yards.
Yeah. Kind of a copy and paste analysis for the Devonta Smith discussion for me. I mean, Devonta Smith is AJ Brown next to him. Jaylen Waddle is Tyreek Hill next to him. I have Devonta's my wide receiver 18. Waddle's my wide receiver 19. I have Devonta Smith statted out to have like 10 more points throughout the season than Jaylen Waddle. So that's literally what it came down to. And it kind of sucks. Jaylen Waddle's ADP actually just moved up to wide receiver 15. So I'm technically 4 spots lower on his ADP than consensus. And I don't love that. I don't like hate Jaylen Waddle by any means. I'm not avoiding him by any means. So it does kind of suck that my ranking reflects that. But I don't know. I think I'd really love the receivers in my top 19, and I don't mind Jaylen Waddle at all. I'm not trying to like fade him or anything. I do just love a couple of receivers that I do think are being undervalued, like the Michael Pittmans of the world. So nothing bad to say about Jaylen Waddle. I think if he has a fully healthy season, he could be electric. I think the Dolphins' offense could be much improved. And I don't know, maybe Odell takes away some things. Maybe the injuries scare me a little bit with Jaylen Waddle. So, there's some things, but for the most part, he's an electric player. Him and Tyreek Hill's regarded as one of the best duos in the NFL. So you can't knock the player at all.
No, it should be fun, but yes, I do understand your argument of being a little lower on him. It does make sense, especially, when he is a wide receiver 2 in his offense. When it's just plain and simple, he is the wide receiver 2. I mean, as long as Tyreek Hill is there, it's going to be pretty hard to overtake him because Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill, and he's just incredible. And Jaylen Waddle has to, be the Robin to his Batman, to Tyreek Hill. But, it's still incredibly high upside. But yes, I do understand the hesitancy, and I do understand the ranking where you have on him. I'm like the very high end of the spectrum, and you're like the low end.
And let's be real, Stores. I think I know why you're on the high end of the spectrum, is you kind of took advantage of him in that rookie season by winning money and winning a fantasy league. So I kind of understand that.
My heart has a special place for Jaylen Waddle and that Dolphins Saints game back in what was it, 2022?
Yep. And that's how
Yeah.
fantasy works. Like players like that will stick with us. Sometimes we'll fade players because they scar us from previous seasons, or sometimes we'll just always believe in someone and stick with them because they came through for us. And I understand that with Jaylen Waddle. He has the upside to win you a league really at any time. And if Tyreek Hill gets hurt or something happens to him, then he's the true league winner. So definitely a lot of variance, a very polarizing player. And let's go on to our wide receiver 15. It's another very polarizing player, Nico Collins for the Houston Texans. He's my wide receiver 15. Stores is wide receiver 15. The consensus wide receiver 14. And he comes in as the NFL Seekers wide receiver 15, just one spot behind ADP. He averaged 17.4 points per game last year, which is insane. He was the wide receiver 12 in fantasy, but obviously it's very hard to project the situation. You've got Tank Dell coming back from injury. You've got Stefon Diggs, previous wide receiver one coming in. He's kind of a diva, will be demanding a workload, demanding some targets. So it's very interesting to project how Nico will, stat out. I personally do think that Nico ends up with the most fantasy points out of the three receivers. I am optimistic about Nico. I think that the connection with CJ Stroud was awesome. At the end of the year, they really leaned into him. I know they didn't really have anyone else, but they really just made him a focal point of the offense. They were throwing screens to him. He's a premier deep threat. He can really have a boom week in fantasy, and that upside is really fun. So I like having him in the top 15. Obviously, the reason we have him one spot below ADP is because there's Stefon Diggs and even Joe Mixon and Tank Dell coming back from injury. There's just so many options, and we know CJ Stroud loves Tank Dell. So it is very interesting. It's very hard to project and stat out, but he was so involved at the end of the season. It makes you very optimistic. That 17.4 points per game makes you very intrigued, and it's one of the harder guys to really just think what just predict what he's going to do. Really,
Yeah, no, I mean, he was fun, man, especially like you said at the end of the season. In the playoffs, he was just a touchdown machine. It just felt like his chemistry with CJ Stroud just really clicked. It felt like they were finding ways to get him in the end zone, which was really exciting at the end of the year. And he just is a guy that has those huge giant boom weeks, and he was getting open down the field at a consistent rate. I mean, he had 2 games last year over 190 receiving yards. He had 4 games over 140 receiving yards. So he has that big upside, those big boom week potentials, those league winning games. I mean, and CJ Stroud was hurt for a couple games at the end of the season, but I mean, Nico Collins went for 80 receptions for 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns with an average depth of target of 16.2. So when he's catching the ball, he's getting points. But yeah, we do have him one spot lower just because there is so many mouths to feed in that offense. But I'm a firm believer he is the wide receiver one. I feel like he is the best wide receiver in this offense. And with how I saw Stefon Diggs regress last year at the end of the season, I really feel like this is an offense that's going to run through Nico Collins and everyone else is going to complement him. But it is a little scary, and I am a little hesitant to draft him at this ADP. I don't know if I'll be drafting him in a lot of my leagues at this ADP just because of that offense and how stacked it is. But I don't know. He is a scary prospect, but he is a top 15 wide receiver, but he's just scary at his ADP. I'm scared to draft him there.
yeah. There's some receivers that are a little bit scary to take him over, but if he falls pick or two, I think he could definitely be a value. Definitely has the upside. He had 8 touchdowns last year. I think he was just a touchdown machine. I think he has a knack for finding the end zone. So I project him at 8 touchdowns this year as well. Obviously, he'll have a little bit less yards than 1,300. I would say around 1,100, which isn't bad at all. So yeah, still definitely a very viable option. We'll have those boom weeks if you draft CJ Stroud and move him drastically up your board because that stat could be very valuable. So really love Nico Collins. Really exciting player. And with that, let's go on to our wide receiver 14. Another very interesting discussion. It's Brandon Aiyuk for the San Fran 49ers. My wide receiver 14, Stores' wide receiver 18, the consensus wide receiver 13, and he comes in as a seeker as wide receiver 14. This is a really, really interesting discussion as well. It seems like the last 4 guys have been interesting discussions because these receiver rooms are really changing up. The Niners go and draft Ricky Pearsall, pick 31, and I was really high on Ricky Pearsall. I think Shanahan has a plan for him. I think they'll have a role in place for him. So that makes it really interesting because low key, Ricky Pearsall is like if he was to be a Deebo or a Aiyuk replacement, he would definitely be the Aiyuk replacement because they play very similar. The route running archetypes, the specialists, and they thrive in the intermediate game, getting open over the middle of the field. That's what Pearsall is. So it will be really interesting to see how that coincides, how Pearsall's target share plays out. Obviously, we're lower on him than the consensus right now. So that is why it is, this offense already had so many mouths to feed. It was comical last year, and it was fine. He had 15.6 points per game, which is insane, for how stacked that offense was. But, bringing in Pearsall, Cowing, I really don't have any idea how it's planned out to be. And I don't even have him as the number one 49ers receiver. I'll just be honest. So I am a little bit, I guess, down on Aiyuk compared to consensus. I'm only one spot lower, but I do think that there's some sus things with the, Pearsall pick and just all the mouths to feed in the first place. But he will be very reliable, very high floor. I just don't know if the upside's crazy.
Fire pick, NGL.
What?
For those who get that, you don't remember Kyle Shanahan and uh, Lynch, yeah. After they drafted Ricky Pearsall, Brandon Aiyuk texted him, "Fire pick." Not gonna lie,
I wonder if he
it
was low key just being salty and he was like kind of being sarcastic about that, honestly.
it was so awkward, like how they were describing it in there. And they're like hyping up, like, "Oh yeah, he's all hyped about the pick." I'm like, I don't think he is. I think he's pissed. But yeah, I mean, if you'd have told me Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel were still on the 49ers come June, I would have been scratching my head. I thought they were gone draft night. I thought the vibes weren't there. It was weird. And they bring in Ricky Pearsall, just a weird situation. And this just another situation where, I am a little lower, not on the player, but on the situation. Tons of mouths to feed. George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Jacob Cowing, Ricky Pearsall. I mean, there's a lot going on in that offense, and but I really like the chemistry between Brock Purdy and Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, it seems to be his favorite target, his go-to guy on big plays, and Brandon Aiyuk has just delivered. He's just been an incredible route runner, open in the intermediate of the field. He really complements what Brock Purdy does well. Where the depth of the route, the separation, it complements Brock Purdy so well, and he's just a safety net. And he finds his way into the end zone too. I mean, he had 7 touchdowns in that stacked offense last year. So, it is a little. I'm a little hesitant on him. That's why I'm not drafting him at his ADP. I am a little bit lower, but I mean, incredible player, just a little scared off just because of the situation and the contract disputes and everything. I don't know if he holds out into the season yet. We don't even know. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, so interesting. And just at the end of the day, he's hard to rank. He really is hard to rank. These Niners receivers are hard to rank. He finished as a wide receiver 14 last year, comes in as our wide receiver 14, my wide receiver 14. I think he finishes, the same as he did last year. So take that for what you will. I think he has the exact same season. He had 7 touchdowns last year. I project him right at 7 touchdowns again this year. I think he'll have a little bit less yards, obviously. But yeah, very polarizing and interesting discussion. And I do think that Brandon Aiyuk emerged as like the number one receiver for Purdy, but we'll go into a wide receiver 13 because I do think Deebo is still higher on the pecking order in terms of just, overall offensive production, overall just offensive piece on this 49ers offense. I do think Shanahan still values Deebo behind CMC as that guy. And so he will be my wide receiver 13, Stores as wide receiver 19, the consensus wide receiver 15, comes in as the NFL Seekers wide receiver 13. And I do think it is being underrated how special he was last year. He had 16.2 points per game last year, which is even crazier than Aiyuk's points per game. He kind of was a league winner at the end of the season. He was playing great. He had those boom weeks. If you stacked him with Purdy, it was GG. That was like a 60-point stack every week by the end of the season. They were just completely balling. And I do think that Deebo kind of picks it up. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm too high on him. Maybe he just gets traded and I look like an idiot. But I do think that Shanahan still values Deebo as that guy out of the receivers. And I do think he'll be the most involved in the total landscape of the offense out of all these receivers. And I just really am optimistic. That 16.2 points per game is a little bit high to project, but I do think he is around, 15, 16, and he will have those really big boom weeks. I think he'll be a huge part of this 49ers offense. And I think those boom weeks are just really kind of attractive and something I want to target in my draft. So I'm definitely loving drafting Deebo Samuel, and I'm definitely going to be higher on him than most. I think he just, he's kind of a touchdown machine. He finds the end zone, and whether he's running it or catching it, I just think he's such a fun piece.
He really is, and I'll play devil's advocate because I am a little bit more hesitant on Deebo Samuel too. I mean, the player is just incredible. I mean, you go back to 2021 where he had that 1,400 receiving yard season, 121 targets, 6 touchdowns, and then he was kind of doing that Christian McCaffrey role before he was there, and he was running the ball and he had 365 yards and 8 touchdowns. He was the goal line running back and everything, and he was so fun. And I feel like they've just kind of gone away from that. I feel like he literally said he didn't want to be a running back. He wants to play wide receiver, which I wish he was still in that fun kind of role. I mean, he still does it, but just not at the level he was doing it at, and is not at the amount of carries and everything he had in back in 2021. But he is a fun chess piece. I am a little bit scared of him. I think the offense does run through Brandon Aiyuk. I think Brandon Aiyuk is the little bit better, downfield, safer hands. Brock Purdy's little safety net blanket. I feel like he targets him and tends to go towards him a little bit more. But I do understand because I think Deebo Samuel, in my opinion, is a better receiver. He's a better all around prospect. And so I get where you're coming from with all the upside and everything. And then he does have the upside of taking the end arounds, of taking some goal line touches and everything because he is just a chess piece.
Yeah, between Aiyuk and Deebo, it's really just calling your shot. It's a coin flip between like who will have the better season. It's not like a AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle, where we know it's the 1 and 2. This one's kind of just like pick your 1 and 2. It could be a different
Pick your
one and
poison,
two
baby.
every single week. Yeah, it really is. Like, I mean, depends on what defense you're playing and what like if it's zone or man on who could be the wide receiver one that week. So it is really hard to project. But I'm calling my shot on Deebo. Stores is calling a shot on Aiyuk. We're both not the highest on these two just because at the end of the day, the whole offense is gonna have to eat. There's so much talent to spread it to. So it will be very interesting. If you draft Brock Purdy, definitely move these guys up your list because those stacks are lethal in San Fran. They put up some numbers, they put up some touchdowns. So definitely want to value those stacks. But anything else you want to say on the Deebo Aiyuk combo?
No, let's move on to number 12, man. This is gonna be another good discussion.
All right, yeah, very interesting discussion here with our wide receiver 12. We both have Drake London for the Falcons as our wide receiver 12. He's a consensus wide receiver 10, and he's the NFL Seekers wide receiver 12. He averaged 10.9 points per game last year, obviously, but it's obviously a very easy and obvious projection going into this year, going from Arthur Smith and Desmond Ritter to Kirk Cousins and Zach Robinson. It honestly couldn't be more of a comical transition and projection and obvious up arrow pointing towards Drake London. It's really exciting. He was a great prospect. I mean, I think he's everyone's favorite breakout candidate this year, just in general, in the fantasy and NFL community, because he really was such a fun prospect. That top 10 pick coming out of USC. He's a great, contested ball. You could tell he had that basketball background because he goes up and plucks the ball out of the air. So he's just a really fun player. I think Kirk Cousins is going to love him. He's their clear wide receiver one in this offense over, Mooney and I mean, honestly, all the receivers opposite of him are just kind of mid. So he is going to be a focal point for Kirk Cousins. We know Kirk Cousins produces great receivers, and it might look low having us or having him 2 spots below his ADP, but I think we're not like low or down on him or this offense at all. It's more just there's some really good receivers that maybe we're just a little bit higher on that are a little bit more proven. This is kind of the what have you shown me versus what can you do for me. It's a very projection versus production argument here, and it's a very hard one, but obviously optimistic.
Very optimistic. Yeah, I mean, Drake London is going to be one of the most interesting pieces in fantasy. And it's like, how high are you going to draft Drake London? Because we've seen what Kirk Cousins has done with wide receivers. Obviously, the last, several years with Justin Jefferson being the overall fantasy wide receiver one. So Drake London, high upside, incredible talent. Like you said, a top 10 pick out of USC, kind of that Mike Williams architect, big bodied wide receiver, but also a little bit better finesse, route running wide receiver too. So, I mean, the upside and the ceiling is all there. He can be a really, really special player. And it's all, yeah, it's like, it's show me. And so it's the people, or it's who's going to be brave enough to draft Drake London high because he will go high, but how high is he going to go? It's almost like a game of chicken here. It's like who's gonna take him first and who's gonna take him and how high is he going? Because I mean he has the upside. Honestly, I'll throw it out there. I think he has the upside of a top five wide receiver this year. Kirk Cousins will probably absolutely feed him. He could be a 120 reception type guy and 10 touchdowns. I can see it. And then on the other side, I could see him not being that, because we haven't seen it yet. I mean, obviously, he has back to back seasons of 100 plus targets. He is yet to produce a season with more than 5 touchdowns. Obviously, he's been playing with some of the worst quarterbacks play in the NFL, which is not his fault. So it's a game of chicken this year with Drake London, man. It's like who's gonna do it first?
Yep. Like I said, he's everyone's favorite breakout candidate. Everyone knows he's going to be better. Everyone knows he's going to positively progress. He had 2 touchdowns last season. The question is, how much will he progress? Will it, pay his value? He is being drafted at the end of round 2. I'll just be completely honest right now. I'm drafting Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley over like the Drake Londons and Brandon Aiyuk's. If I'm just being honest, I would much rather have the running backs there in round 2. So keep an eye on that in your drafts. Honestly, in this tier of receivers, I do think it is worth it to just take the running backs. But I mean, yeah, it's obvious. I think I would project 6, 7 touchdowns for Drake London. Like you said, there's a path where he could get 10 touchdowns and be a top 5 receiver in fantasy because he is that type of player. He's a red zone threat. He really is with his frame. He boxes people out and he has great hands. So I think Kirk Cousins will love him. They'll be, throwing some touchdowns with Kirk Cousins and Zach Robinson coming over. So I'm definitely very excited and really optimistic for this team and Drake London in general. But that ADP is rich, man. It's scary.
Yeah, hit the nail on the head with the hammer, whatever the saying goes. I'm getting a little woozy here, but yeah, I mean, I'm excited, man. I'm really excited, and I'm excited to talk about this next guy as well because and like I said, like I keep saying, another good conversation coming up here now.
Yeah, all these receiver rooms are really fun to talk about. So let's go to his division rival, Chris Olave for the Saints. My wide receiver 11, Stores' wide receiver 11, the consensus wide receiver 11, your mom's wide receiver 11, everyone's wide receiver 11, Chris Olave. Very interesting projection, but not really because, I mean, he's in the exact same situation as he was last year. Like he had 14.5 points per game, which is so respectable considering he had Derek Carr as his quarterback, but sadly, he still has Derek Carr throwing to him. Sadly, still in the same exact situation. So I think you can just kind of expect the same exact season.
Yeah, you can just expect the same results. It's copy and paste the last 2 seasons. He's had, I mean, obviously this will be his third season in the NFL, back-to-back seasons of over 120 targets, back-to-back seasons of over 1,000 receiving yards, and back-to-back seasons with 4 and 5 touchdowns. He's played in 15 and 16 games played, so maybe if he stays healthy for that one extra game or the 2 extra game, we could see those numbers uptick a little bit and we could see 6 or 7 touchdowns. But you're going to see 1,000 yards, you're going to see 80 plus receptions, and you're gonna have a handful of touchdowns. So it's just copy and paste what he did last year. He's so solid, he's so smooth, he's such an incredible wide receiver. I cannot wait till this offense has a better quarterback so Chris Olave can, be a top 10, top 5 wide receiver because the skill set is just beautiful. He's one of the most clean prospects, one of the most clean wide receivers that can do everything at an elite level.
Yeah, just what a prospect he was coming out of Ohio State. One of the smoother route runners you'll see. So fast, can really separate downfield. And this is honestly kind of a boring conversation. I think every single other receiver that we talked about was a really interesting conversation because the receiver rooms and situations are so much different. But this one, like he had 138 targets last year. ESPN projects him to have 138 targets this year. He had 87 catches last year. ESPN projects him to have 86 catches this year. Like he's gonna have a very similar season. It will come down to the touchdowns, the yards that he produces, and it will come down to his yak and just his personal production. It will kind of come down to that to see what his upside is. But I don't think the upside is too crazy. I wouldn't be drafting him as a top 10 receiver or anything. I do think this wide receiver 11 is just the perfect sweet spot as you see with everyone ranking him there. I do think it's the perfect spot that he deserves to go here. He deserves to go with that ADP. And I do think he improves a little bit over last year, maybe has a touchdown or 2 more. But other than that, I think it'll be pretty similar.
Chalk, baby. Write it in stone, put it in stone. This was a good discussion on the 20 through 11 wide receivers. It's going to be fun to get into our top 10 for you guys here in the next couple of days. But fantasy it's peaking, man. It's right around the corner, man. And so it's fun to get all this content out.
Yeah, it's coming. We're gonna get some mock drafts out to you guys, some more fantasy content. We're gonna get our deep dive series started where we go, dive deep into every single team in the NFL, every division in the NFL. So some super fun things on the horizon for the NFL Seekers podcast. Definitely check us out, like, comment, subscribe for the algorithm. Thank you guys for tuning in to another receiver episode. Stay tuned for our top 10. Peace out.
Peace.